chapter 2 is called Mr. Twit. Mr. Twit was one of these very hairy-faced men. The whole of his face, except for his forehead, his eyes, and his nose, was covered with thick hair. The stuff even sprouted in revolting tufts out of his nostrils and ear holes. Mr. Twit felt that this hairiness made him look terrifically wise and grand. But, in truth, he was neither of these things. Mr. Twit was a twit. He was born a twit, and now, at the age of 60, he was a bigger twit than ever. The hair on Mr. Twit's face didn't grow smooth and matted, as it did on most hairy-faced men. It grew in spikes and stuck out straight like bristles on a nail brush. And how often did Mr. Twit wash his bristly, nail-brushy face of his? The answer is never. Not even on Sundays. He hadn't washed his beard for years. What do you think about that?
Bad.
Here's Mr. Twit. Hi, and welcome back to the Twits. Say hi, Sawyer.
Hi.
Dirty Beards, Chapter 3. As you know, an ordinary, unhairy face like yours or mine simply gets a bit smudgy if it is not washed often enough. And there's nothing so awful about that. But a hairy face is a very different matter. Things cling to hair, especially food. Things like gravy go right in amongst the hairs and stay there. You and I can wipe our smooth faces with a cloth, and we quickly look more or less all right again. But the hairy man cannot do that. We can also, if we are careful, eat our meals without spreading food all over our faces, but not some of the hairy man. Watch carefully next time you see a hairy man eating his lunch, and you will notice that even if he opens his mouth very wide, it is impossible for him to get a spoon of beef stew or ice cream or chocolate sauce into it without leaving some of it on the hairs. Mr. Twit didn't even bother to open his mouth wide when he ate. As a result, and because he never washed, there was always hundreds of bits of old breakfasts and lunches and suppers sticking in the hair around his face. They weren't big bits, mind you, because he used to wipe those off with the back of his hand or on his sleeve while he was eating. But if you looked closely, not that you'd ever want to, you would see tiny little specks of dried up scrambled egg stuck in the hairs, and spinach, and tomato ketchup, and fish fingers, and minced chicken livers, and all the other disgusting things Mr. Twit liked to eat. If you looked closer still, hold your nose now, ladies and gentlemen, if you peered deep into the mustachy bristles sticking out over his upper lip, you would probably see much larger objects that had escaped the wipe of his hand, like a piece of maggoty green cheese, or a moldy old cornflake, or even the slimy tail of a tinned sardine. Ew.
You.
Because of all this, Mr. Twit never really went hungry. By sticking out his tongue and curling it sideways to explore the tiny hair jungle around his mouth, he was always able to find a tasty morsel hidden here or there to nibble on. What I am trying to tell you is that Mr. Twit was a foul and smelly old man. He was also an extremely horrid old man, as you will find out in a moment. Mrs. Twit. Mrs. Twit was no better than her husband. She did not, of course, have a hairy face. It was a pity she didn't, because that, at any rate, would have hidden some of her ugliness. Take a look at her. Have you ever seen a woman any uglier than that?
Yes.
I doubt it. But the funny thing is that Mrs. Twit wasn't born ugly. She had quite a nice face when she was young. The ugliness had grown upon her year by year as she got older. Why would that happen? I'll tell you why. If a person has ugly thoughts, it begins to show on the face. And when that person has ugly thoughts every day, every week, every year, the face gets uglier and uglier until you get so ugly you can hardly bear to look at it. A person who has good thoughts cannot ever be ugly. You can have a wonky nose, and crooked mouth, and a double chin, and stick out teeth, but if you have good thoughts, you will shine out of your face like sunbeams, and you will always look lovely. Nothing shone out of Mrs. Twit's face. In her right hand, she carried a walking stick. She used to tell people that this was because she had warts growing on the bottom of her left foot, and walking was painful. But the real reason she carried that stick is so that she could hit things with it, like dogs and cats and small children. And then there was the glass eye. Mrs. Twit had a glass eye that was always looking the other way. That's it for today.